people often ask me, like, do you think bipolar disorder gives you like writing superpowers, or like, do you think if you take medication, you're killing your creativity? I know that for myself, I want to be able to finish things so that other people can hold them in their hands as a source of strength. And I know that if I'm not taking care of myself with medication, I will not finish anything.
I'm Michael Tamblyn. This is Kobo in Conversation. My guest is novelist Leanne Toshiko Simpson, the author of Never Been Better and winner of the 2025 Rakuten Kobo Emerging Writers Prize. Never Been Better is the story of a group of 3 friends who met in the psych ward, but time has passed. Now 2 of them are about to get married, while a third figures out whether to swallow her feelings or let them all out. Leanne Toshiko Simpson, welcome to Kobo.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so happy that you're here because not only are you the winner of the Kobo Emerging Writers Prize, but you also win the prize for the person who was most thrilled to win the Emerging Writers Prize.
I was so surprised and pumped. I really did not, it didn't occur to me that could happen. That was not on my possible scenario list.
And I have to say, as a person like giving out prizes, all you want is for someone to be totally thrilled about receiving it. So thank you so much for that. That was very gratifying. We finally got it together. It was our deepest wish to get you into the office, and we're doing it with a live studio audience. Yeah. They'll learn how to be a better studio audience in time. It's fine. So first, let's jump into the book. Can you tell us about the 3 friends that are at the center of this story?
Yeah, of course. So I have in my brain called them the 3 musketeers of the psych ward for a long time. We have Dee, who is our protagonist, who has really good intentions but very bad execution. Wants to do the right thing, doesn't always have the right way of going around it. We have Misa, who is the caretaker of the group. She is soft but strong and very unwilling to be wrong. And we have Matt, who's a bit of a teddy bear musician, not quite figuring out what he's going to do after the ward, but is everybody's favorite person to talk to.
And as the book opens up, Dee has just received something in the mail. And what starts us off?
She receives a wedding invitation to Matt and Misa's wedding, not her own wedding, which she might have imagined in the future. And her sister Tilly throws a dart at it. And that basically sets up the whole vibe of the first chapter.
And Dee's sister Tilly is a force. So, tell me a little bit about her and the role that she plays in all of this.
She is ride and die for Tilly, and she takes care of her in a way that also allows her to maybe circumvent some of her own issues. And so she is a really powerful force within the book, while you also get the sense that there's something else going on underneath that Dee, being wrapped up in her own problems, doesn't always recognize. She also doubles as a huge amount of comic relief, which you need in a book about psychiatric recovery.
So often in books, mental health is a crisis, or it's a plot device, or it's a character defect. One of the things that made this book so remarkable and that captured our attention at the Emerging Writers Prize was how seamlessly mental health is woven into the fabric of the story. Can you tell us a little bit just about the mental and emotional landscapes that some of these characters are inhabiting as the story starts out?
Yeah, I think one of the beautiful things about romance is it's 2 individuals falling in love, but there's so much about their social lives that filter into that experience. And I think when you're living with mental illness, often you have a hard time loving and accepting yourself. And so to do that for someone else is such a huge and important step. And so the entire book is asking the question about what is this relationship between love and recovery, and how do you open yourself up to someone else when you haven't quite been honest with what you're going through. And so for Dee and Matt and Misa, the entire book is a love story, but it's also a love story for themselves in order to find the acceptance that they need to actually be good friends, good partners, good community members to other people. And I do think that romance has that incredible potential to ask those bigger questions about community, because we do not love in isolation.
And how would you describe kind of Dee's state of mental health at the beginning of this book?
Oh, that lady is a hot mess. But she's a hot mess with big plans. And sometimes I think when you're living with mental illness, you need this fake deadline that you create for yourself. And she knows that she needs to change. She hasn't been able to pull herself out of depression in order to make those changes. And suddenly there's a wedding date. And that becomes the date in which she must figure herself out to do the right thing. And what she thinks is the right thing at the beginning of the book is not necessarily what ends up being the right thing for her. But it does give her the impetus to get moving, to change something about her life, and really come to terms with all the feelings she's had about the psych ward a year beforehand.
And how are Dee and her friend Misa different? They've been through some of the same experiences. They met on the psych ward, but they now seem to be at different stages or have made different choices in their lives.
Yeah, I think about Dee and Misa. You know, I'm half Japanese. I'm both French Canadian and Japanese. And I think about them as kind of mirrored sides of myself. You know, when I was first diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I was like, if you're not being honest about your condition, you're lying. And that is just not how it's possible to move through the world at all times, because not all spaces are safe, not all people are safe. And I think Misa has kind of the opposite kind of sentiment about this, where she thinks that she has to protect herself and protect the people around her from what's going on inside, so she is not open at all. And I think that many of the conversations between these friends bring them a little bit closer to finding a space in which they feel comfortable being themselves and being honest and offering genuine connection. And that's the hardest thing to do when you live with mental illness, because you always feel like you have to lie about yourself to be accepted. And the longer that you lie, the harder it is to be honest about when you're really struggling.
Let's pull on that a little bit, because for the characters of your book, that question of how to be honest, how to be genuine, is a point of conflict. Like, you've got people taking very different approaches to it through the course of the story and evolving those choices over time. So, you know, it kind of comes down, as you say, to that central question of how out loud do you live your inner life? And can you talk a bit about how that's explored in the book?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, a destination wedding, you're surrounded by your friends and family. So that's one of the most high pressure situations in which people have to mask, right? They feel like they have to be the best version of themselves because it's the best day of their lives. And if anything is less than their best, then it's a failure. And Misa is someone who I think takes that really to heart. And she wants to protect not just her own success, but also Matt's success in a situation that is actually very emotionally hard for him. And so their communication breaks down because they're both trying to protect each other from their greatest weakness. But I think one thing I've learned living with bipolar disorder is that the more information, the more context you give the people around you, the better they're able to work with you so you actually get to where you need to be. And it took me a really long time because it often felt better to hide those parts of myself so I wasn't rejected. But at the end of the day, people need that context in order to have a real relationship and a real chance at making things work.
You set the story at the destination wedding, and then we have all of the psych ward experiences where these characters have met as backstory. First of all, I'm not sure which setting is more stressful.
Fair point.
I think maybe the destination wedding might be the thing that broke me. But why frame the story with those two alternating settings?
Yeah, I think that, having been in a psych ward myself, the weirdest thing about it is that all your time is kind of dictated to you. Like, it's like when you shower, when you eat, when you take your medication, there's always someone checking in on you. And when you get out of the ward, one of the hardest things is just the expansiveness of time. Like, how do you create a schedule for yourself? And Dee's someone who's really struggled with that since she gets out of the ward. And in some ways, the destination wedding mirrors the psych ward in a little bit, but like, here's your itinerary for a week. This is when you eat, sleep, and breathe. And so I kind of like the tension between this very like high class, expensive environment and then a very under-resourced psych ward in Scarborough. And thinking about how access to mental health isn't always equal. The choices that we get to make for our well-being aren't always supported in the same ways. And so I really liked flipping back and forth between those very different settings in order to highlight some of that through each character's journey.
And you did take time and care in describing that psych ward setting, not just in terms of its effect on the people inside it, but talking about resourcing and talking about like less than optimal experiences inside it, and was that you going back through a mental list of things that you wish could have been better or things that you wish people knew more about in that clinical setting?
Yeah, it's hard. So I was in the psych ward in 2013, and I've worked in many mental health settings over the last, 12 or so years. And so I have a lot of big opinions that I don't think I was able to articulate at the time. But at the same time, I know that the journey that I've taken, like being a psych ward survivor, being able to be a professor, to be a writer, to speak on stages about mental health, I know that not everyone I was in the ward with gets that chance. And so I do my best to bring not just my perspective, but many of the feelings and the characterizations and the moods of people who might not get that same chance, because I've spent a lot of time, being told to be realistic about what's possible for me living with a disability, needing a lot of accommodations to make it through life. And now that I'm here and I have been able to achieve things that I didn't think were possible, I want to give other people the most information, the most amount of representation that I can, because I know how hard it is to get out of that psych ward space.
And not just having the lived experience, but having this incredible array of tools to convey that lived experience to other people out there who may never have been able to kind of be in that setting themselves.
Yeah, the best part of publishing this book has been, I get messages from people who are reading my book in the psych ward, and it's a safe space for them. I get messages from people who have lost family members to suicide, and they see their family members in this book, and it offers them a little bit of hope and representation, and the feeling that, a lot of it is so much outside of our control, but the best thing we can do is be together as much as we possibly can. And so every time I'm anxious about, I don't know if I'm a real writer, I don't know if I am doing enough, I keep a little folder of those messages, because that's who I'm really writing for, people living with mental health challenges and the people who care about them.
When you were first approaching this book, with everything you'd experienced yourself and the desire to turn it into fiction, outside of your own writing, had you ever seen bipolar disorder and the life sort of around it depicted faithfully in writing before?
Yeah, I would say The Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick is one of my all-time favorite books. The movie is also beautiful, slightly different ending, and I think it's interesting that they differ a little bit. But that book has so much love and laughter and family in it, and not always your actual family. Found family is a huge thing when you live with mental illness, because not everyone's going to get it, and you can't spend all your energy trying to pull them over to your side. And so I love that depiction in that book, because he's writing from a deep understanding of mental health and also the community that surrounds it. So that is a really great representation. There's also a really wonderful new romantic comedy by Rachel Rodner-Katz called Isn't It Obvious? It's a You've Got Mail retelling, and one of the characters has bipolar disorder, and we love to see people with mental illness getting their happy endings.
But would you say there was a shortage of people who know how to tell that kind of story well?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of books that use the highs of mania and the lows of depression as more of a plot device. And so in my book, I actually don't have a lot of scenes where they're at their highest high or their lowest low, because I want to explore kind of the everydayness of living with mental illness, where you're often in that gray area between sick and well and trying your best to make it through. And there aren't a lot of books that don't use mental illness as drama in some ways. And so I really wanted a very almost mundane portrayal of what it's like to live with depression, because it is a little bit mundane living with depression. Even though it's going to pass, you're like, I just have to live with this filter in front of my face for X amount of time, and I just have to trust that I can get through this. But one thing is that the longer that you live with mental illness, I think the more knowledge you have, the more tools you have to kind of push back and give yourself more time so that you're able to see the sun again.
One thing that really jumped out for me is that you capture the physicality of mental struggle well, like body tension and churning stomachs and the sweats and the kind of the physicality that's such a part of that experience. And in all of the writing that I've ever seen around it, this seemed to really nail it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, one of the things, if you ever like take a medication, like look at its side effects, like look up its side effects on WebMD. I actually once
No,
made
that's terrifying.
it is terrifying, but then you can make poetry out of them. I made a whole book of poems out of, I like Googled every medication I was in like WebMD, and then I used all the like found descriptions of the medications to create a poem that felt like each medication. And I think that, I'm obviously writing from my own experience of living with bipolar, but there's 3 characters living with bipolar disorder, and I want to give them all very different like perceptions of bipolar disorder, interactions with their medications, comfort with getting help and talking about things, because it is a really big array. And one of the hard things about, I think, talking about mental health is not everyone has the same language, especially like, I'm Japanese Canadian. There's a really big cultural stigma in my community. And so if we don't have the same language, it's harder to broach those conversations. And so what I hope Never Been Better does is gives people a place to start those conversations, even with the imperfections, even with some synonyms that don't quite line up. But knowing that the most important thing in that book is that even though people don't always communicate well, they are trying.
Mm-hmm. I understand that you didn't wait around for perfect mental health for yourself to write this book.
Definitely not. But that's why it took so long.
Okay.
Living with mental illness, you can actually read the book, and there are parts of the book, like in the chapter where she's describing all the mental health resources she's Googling at night. I did that. I was definitely manic when I wrote that paragraph. That whole section reads a lot faster than other areas of the book. And similarly, when my mood was lower, I would write, I know the overpass scene, I was pretty depressed when I wrote the overpass scene, and the language moves a little bit more slowly. And I like that because I think it invites you into the feel of bipolar disorder a little bit more instead of kind of explaining everything to the reader. But yeah, I think people often ask me like, do you think bipolar disorder gives you like writing superpowers, or like, do you think if you take medication, you're killing your creativity? And that's a lot of people really do feel that way. They don't want to lose who they are. And I know that for myself, I want to be able to finish things so that other people can hold them in their hands as a source of strength. And I don't know that if I'm not taking care of myself with medication, I will not finish anything. And so it's hard because, yes, do I have really big feelings? And sometimes I take on a lot of creative projects when I'm higher. Yes, but I may not get to the end of them. And so to me, I have to do what is sustainable in my writing, in the way that I live, in the way that I take care of people around me. Sustainability is the key.
And are there other things that you do in your writing practice to help kind of accommodate for yourself in that?
Yeah, I definitely don't write every day because a lot of days I am ill and it's not really possible for me to write in that state. Sometimes they line up and I need to write a depression scene when I'm depressed, and that's helpful, but a lot of the times I don't have a lot of control over that, so I don't write every day. I use cold plunges a lot to reset my body when I need to write with kind of a clean slate, so I'm always taking cold showers. I like loiter in the sauna whenever I can, and I find that physical reset allows my brain to reset a lot. And I also do a lot of journaling in my phone, just writing down snippets of conversations. Like if I feel a bad feeling coming on, I'm like, I won't feel like this later. I better write it down now. And it allows you to get a bit of distance from those like scary feelings. Mm-hmm. So you're a little bit more like you're like in the field studying yourself. And it gives you a little bit of safety and distance from those terrifying thoughts. So you're like, this is interesting, instead of this is going to destroy me. And so being a writer actually helps kind of strengthen that impulse to take a second and be like, maybe this won't be here forever.
And so you have one layer of that, which is you observing and being mindful of the emotions and the feelings that are moving through you. Then you have a second one of looking at what's showing up on the page and having to push that through a filter of, is this story progressing the way I want it to progress? Do you find that you're having to go back through things and kind of look at it with fresh eyes, depending on where you are in kind of the ebb and flow of your mental cycles? Yeah,
I think so. I work with memoir writers a lot. Mm-hmm. Memoir is actually where I started, but I don't think my family's super comfortable with me writing about mental illness directly, so I choose fiction as a kind of a form of respect and also creative freedom and safety for myself. But I work with primarily memoir writers. And the thing is, there's the idea that in memoir you have to put down like an inalienable truth on the page. But the problem with that is that truth changes when you get more perspective from it. And so editing becomes a huge part of how do I make this story felt in the same way that I felt it at that time. And that distance in that editorial eye help you get that reader closer to the immersion of that experience. And so I often return to everything I write multiple times because I'm very in tune with the way that time changes. Like being someone with bipolar disorder, there are times where I feel like I don't want to be here, and I know that that's not going to stick around forever. So revisiting over time gives you kind of the median emotional impact of that work.
Let's talk a little bit about the life cycle of this book, because you have an academic career, you have, and I want to talk about a lot of the different aspects of that. But tell me about the genesis of this book. Like, how long had it been cooking before you actually, got down to it?
Yeah, so when I was on disability leave from my corporate job, I had decided, I was like, if I work a corporate job, everything in my life will be okay. I will prove that I am a healthy, functional person. And like 3 months into that job, I was on disability leave. And that's when I started writing Never Been Better, because I was so depressed, I needed something to make me laugh. And I was at the time in my MFA trying to write a hard-hitting literary memoir, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And my supervisor was actually Mona Awad, and she was like, Leanne, are you enjoying yourself? And I was like, no, I'm very, very sad all of the time. And she was like, is there anything that makes you happy to write? And she really encouraged me to lean into that, even though I was like, oh, an MFA and a rom-com, they're going to be really mad at me. They were actually super cool. And it's nice to do something a little different sometimes, There are a lot of books about mental illness, but few of them are rom-coms. I think the genre invites people to pick up a book and learn something that they might not have picked up if it was like a straight nonfiction, Mm-hmm. It's an invitation for readers to explore in a safe space where there's a happy ending. And so I think there's a really big power in that. But that's why the book took so long. I abandoned my old MFA project, picked up this book, and then worked on it through COVID. I sold it in a bunch of territories, but not all at the same time. So there was a lot of editing, and HarperCollins was really, really patient with me. I sent them flowers a couple times to be like, sorry, I'm like this. But, I think that I also, to talk about mental health like this, it used to be hard for me to do interviews about this because, it was still so raw being in the hospital, like living with suicidal ideation. I think that the book took the right amount of time for me to be able to have those conversations, because I have these conversations with strangers. People reach out to me on the internet all the time, and I want to be there for them, and I want to show up for them. And I think that it took this amount of time to publish this book because it took this amount of time for me to be this open. And I think that's okay.
In the dialogue between you and your publisher, how was that in terms of being open about your process, your mental health, what that was going to mean in terms of how you were going to work together?
Yeah, they were really wonderful, because if I was unable to write because I was in a major depression, I would tell them. My agent, I originally connected with my agent in 2016. I used to be a mental health video blogger, and she saw one of my videos. I was like, do you have a book? And I was like, yes. And then that was around the same time I was starting my corporate job and went into a huge depression. So I didn't deliver that book for 4 years. And when I did, she was like, I'm glad you're ready now. And we just kept going. Mm-hmm. I've been very lucky to work with a lot of people who have a deep understanding of who I am. And I don't have to pretend that I'm any different than I am. And that's honestly been the key. Being a professor, all my students know I have mental illness. Being a writer, everybody I work with in publishing knows that I have these ups and downs. And it makes it easier for me to take the measures that are necessary for me to finish the work that I'm proud of.
Did you tell your students you were writing a book?
They Google you when they have a professor.
That's true. They
like,
do.
They look up "rate my professor" and then they look you up on Google. I moved into my house and my neighbor was like, "Oh, I saw on the internet that you have depression." I was like, "Yeah, let's talk about that." But it's kind of freeing in a way, because I don't have to. I there's no big secrets in my life. Mm-hmm. This is some of the hardest things that I've been through are also the things that have made my work so meaningful to me. And so I think it all comes out okay in the wash. And I hope more people feel like that as they live with mental illness. Like, yes, there are these incredibly tough times. You're like, why is this happening to me? What is the point of this? And there is so much light afterwards if you stick around long enough.
One of the things I found remarkable about this book was that it got written in the midst of all of the other things that you do. So let's break this down for a second, because, and let me know if I'm wrong on any of these. You are teaching literature and creative writing at University of Toronto's Trinity College.
Yes.
Yes, okay. You are the director of literary programming there.
Yes.
Which is its own thing. Okay, and you're leading a campaign called Trinity Reads. I want to find out what that is. You have a creative writing circle for racialized students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, check. You are a research fellow at the Center for Global Disability Studies.
I am.
Okay, good. And then, when there's extra time, you are in a mentorship program for like writers and memoirists also? For flying books?
Yeah, I didn't always think, and I'll be so real with you, I didn't always think I would see my 30s. I'm really excited to be in my 30s, and writing was a really big lifeline for me. So part of my work, no matter what I'm doing, if I'm writing, if I'm teaching, if I'm doing mentorship, if I'm running literary, I've run author events for Trinity College and they're really great. I want to offer as many lifelines to other people as I can. And so all of that's part of my practice. I'm actually not in a huge rush to write like 10 books. Yeah. That's not really who I am as a person. I'm going to write and I'm going to enjoy meeting all of the people I never thought I'd get to meet along the way. And I think that's the beautiful part of writing. It's the connection.
And are you one of these people who just sees, what we need? We need a creative writing circle for racialized students, and then you do it? Or does someone say, we need this, and you go, I will do that? Are you the perpetual volunteer, or are you the perpetual creator?
Oh, I have a lot of ideas, and I do almost all of them.
Awesome.
It's a real problem. But it's nice because all of my jobs are jobs that I've invented. Yeah. They were not jobs that existed. They were just stuff that I was like, hey, you know what, we should do this. And then I'm very persuasive and annoying, so I often get people to do them.
Amazing. And so tell me about how your experiences of a writer flow into the classroom. Like when people are coming to you and saying, I have stories in me, or I have a book in me and I need to know how to get them out. What are some of the things that you're putting in front of people when they're first struggling with that first story?
Yeah, I teach a lot of debuts because I think it's really inspiring for students to be like, this is what it feels like to do something for the first time and know you can do it. I teach a lot of racialized writers who are Canadian. I teach also about the histories of why some stories have been put forth as very Canadian, some stories have been suppressed. I also do a lot of assignments where I ask them about what makes them write and make it a little bit more reflective. And so it's bringing together that critical eye for literature and that creative side that helps you narrate your own stories. I think that the best writing is both creative and critical. And so that's something I try to offer my students. And also, when I was at the University of Toronto, my first publications were all the same student magazines that I'm telling my students to submit to now. So who knows, maybe in a couple years, one of my students will be in here talking into this lovely microphone.
Have they come back to you having read your book and asked you questions about things that you've written?
Yeah, I would say most of the students, especially the ones I work with at Trinity Reads, they've read my book. And so that's always a little bit alarming to have your students know so much about you, even through fiction. But it's also really nice because it normalizes conversations about mental health on campus, because most people diagnosed with mental illness are diagnosed between the ages of 17 and 24, which is a lot of the time you spend on campus. And so I'm very glad that my students are able to come to me and be open with that kind of stuff and know that writing can be an outlet for them, even if they're not super comfortable talking to their friends and families yet. Maybe, like me, the first time their family ever kind of understands how they're feeling is when they see it on the page, and that's okay. That's one way to do it.
I know you say that you don't necessarily want to write 10 books, but do you think you could write 2 books?
Oh, yes. Yes. I assume I'll be like a once every 3 to 5 years kind of writer, given that I'm doing my thesis right now, so that is hard. I'm in a doctoral program, so I'm writing my thesis, but also trying to finish my second book at the same time, so I'm a little slow. Okay,
first of all, that sounds like a lot. But tell me a bit about the PhD. What are you working on?
Well, as you know, in Never Been Better, there's a little bit about Japanese-Canadian intergenerational trauma, just some light dusting in the Rom-Com.
Nice.
Did you want to learn about internment? Now you will. And so I am learning about the history and intergenerational impact of that on community well-being, and using Japanese-Canadian literature as a bit of a catalyst for those kinds of explorations. So I am really passionate about that work. I've been running a Japanese-Canadian writing circle for the last 5 years. And so I have been really lucky to mentor so many writers at different stages of their careers. But it's a little bit heavy though. It's pretty intense. So it's really nice to write very funny, joyful books about mental health on the flip side, so that I'm not too sad.
It does bring me to a question though about essentially putting your grandmother in this book.
Yeah, I don't put real people into my books because I think that's weird. But I did put her in because I knew that she was I was losing her as I was writing the book, and it felt like, a way to keep her with me, like all of her mannerisms. Even when I won the Kobo Award and I went, "You're kidding!" Like, that's what she said when anything good ever happened, because, when you lost all of your possessions and your family to through incarceration, like, you're not really used to having that many good things happening. So me, being the first person in my family to go to grad school, to write a book, like, none of my family is in the arts, like, it was always so pleasantly surprising to her. And so I try to put less pressure on my work now and think, like, isn't this lovely that I get to be here at Kobo in this space doing something that no one in my family could have ever dreamt of. And so I bring a little bit of that, like, wow sense from her into my work.
And you also got to put some of her experiences in that book as well. There are things from the Second World War that end up, in that story, and it feels like those are fragments that you brought forward.
Yeah, so my grandmother, and like many Nisei Japanese Canadians, did not talk about the war for most of her life, but as she started losing her memory, she actually started opening up a little bit more, because I think her guard was down in a bit, and so she wanted me to interview her. And so I have this recording, this beautiful recording, my mom and her and myself sitting in a circle just talking about the camps in a way that we never, ever did as a family. And so parts of the language in the book are based off of that interview. And I have that recording forever. At the very end, she says, "I love you, Leanne." And she never, a lot of Asian Canadians will probably resonate with this, but that's not something we heard a whole lot. And so the fact that me doing that deep work and that memory work with her, that brought that out, it was very meaningful to me, and I hope that she would be very proud of the book too.
When you won the 2025 Kobo Emerging Writers Prize, our category judge, Chantal Gertin, said about your book, Never Been Better, that, quote, "It's a story that will likely offer comfort and recognition to some readers, and perspective and empathy to others, all while playing with romantic comedy expectations in a smart and unexpected way." What did it mean for you to hear that?
Chantal's such a wonderful writer and just an icon in the genre. I know that Never Been Better is a bit of an unusual rom-com, it plays with a lot of those expectations. Mental health is such a huge part of it. Almost more than the individual love story is kind of that focus on community care and networks of support. And so for that to be recognized in this genre was so special and so validating to me, because I always felt like a bit of a weirdo. I was like, this is a rom-com, but don't be mad at me if you don't feel like it's a rom-com. But it is, and in my heart it is. It's my favorite rom-com is My Best Friend's Wedding. And that's why it's based off of that one, because the friendship is at the core of that entire story. And the romance is there too, and you can't have one without the other. And so it felt very magical to hear my name called for that night, because it made me feel like I was on the right track. I'd given up. I wrote a lot of literary nonfiction and memoir, and I was always awarded for, I think, writing some of my trauma in a way that didn't always feel comfortable to me. And so I love that I won for writing mad joy and not just the pain that I had experienced. That is something that I will never take for granted.
Leanne, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
I have been speaking with Leanne Toshiko Simpson, author of Never Been Better and winner of the 2025 Rakuten Kobo Emerging Writers Prize for Romance. Find Leanne's book and all of the other winners at the link in the show notes. Follow us in your podcast player to catch every episode, and if you enjoyed this one, there have never been better ways to show it than a 5-star rating. I have to say that worked so much better when I wrote it down than it does when I say it. But I'm going with it anyway. Kobo in Conversation is produced by Nathan Maharaj and hosted by me, Michael Tamblyn. Thank you for listening.